Good day to everyone. To celebrate 30k subscribers, cause I'm about to reach it soon, I decided to release one video about cRPGs, as you can see in the title. Considering how I built most of my audience through cRPGs, it is time to return something back to cRPGs and to everyone that loves cRPGs as much as I do, cause let's be real, that's why you're all here for. So, what we're gonna do is on this side, we're gonna cover all cRPGs, notable cRPGs that got released since mid-90s all the way to 2025. We're gonna check the sales and the entire percentages for sales, for audience retention, for how many people finished the game, and how many finished the game on the hardest difficulty. We're covering every single notable cRPG in the existence of gaming. So let's not waste time, let's go. The first cRPG in line would be Baldur's Gate 3. 14% finished the game on all platforms with sales over 20 million, while 2.8 million of people finished the actual game. Huge number, but low percentage. Consoles are sitting on around 12% completion rate. PC master race is slightly better, with 16% of players finishing the game, which would be around 4% more than the console players. To compare the finish rates, it's very similar to Skyrim, which is actually solid for most of the casual players. When I finished the game on Tactician difficulty, on Baldur's Gate 3 release date, I was on 0.1% back then for that achievement, and that percentage is sitting now on 5.3%. So 5.3% of people finished the game on the hardest difficulty. There is of course Honor mod that finished less than 2% of players. So good job, cRPG players. Now some interesting numbers. 72% never reached Act 2. Those that reached Act 3 are on around 20%, and they abandoned their run once they reached Baldur's Gate. No wonder, considering how crappy Act 3 was. On the bright side, more people watched than actually played the game. So billions of views on YouTube, Reddit, and all other social media, including X, Facebook, and Instagram on Baldur's Gate 3, and that number keeps growing day by day. Baldur's Gate 3 is the most successful selling cRPG of all time. Pillars of Eternity 1. 15% of players finished Pillars of Eternity 1, and that would be 1% higher than Baldur's Gate 3, believe it or not. So, cRPG players value real cRPGs more, I guess. Pillars sold 1.3 million copies, and 200,000 people actually finished the game. To be more precise, it sold 18 times less than Baldur's Gate 3, even though it's a much better cRPG in terms of gameplay. 46% of people managed to finish Act 1, 26% finished Act 2, 16% completed Act 3, and 15% finished the game. On the hardest difficulty available, so-called Path of the Damned difficulty, only 1% of players managed to finish the game. On a Triple Crown challenge, so that would be Expert Mod, Trial of Iron, and Path of the Damned combined, only 0.3% finished the game worldwide. Impressive number. Pillars of Eternity 2, Deadfire, with all of its DLCs, complete edition, same like Pillars 1. 16% finished the game in total. Similar numbers like Pillars 1 in completion rate, but Pillars 2 flopped hard. It sold only 100k copies on release, but it recovered in the next 8 years to sell additional 210k copies in total. It seems that the cRPG players dislike pirates. I don't know what it could be. Nonetheless, Pillars 2 is one extremely underrated game. Maybe the top 10 most underrated games ever created, cause the game is really good and it sold really bad. Shame. Less than 1% finished the game on Path of the Damned difficulty, while less than 0% 0.01% managed to kill all of its uber bosses on Path of the Damned difficulty. Now that's an insane number, and probably the hardest bosses in the history of cRPGs would belong to Pillars 2. Maybe, and just maybe, you should all consider supporting Obsidian and playing and buying Pillars of Eternity 2, because it's a complete shame that this game sold only 200k copies. Wasteland 2. In Exile's Wasteland 2, 16% of players managed to finish this game, with 550k copies sold in total, so slightly above 500,000 copies sold. Of course, PC players, again with higher percentage than console players, 16% versus 12%. Should I also mention how 500k copies are on PC and only 50k copies are on consoles? The funny thing is, Wasteland 2 is 3 times more successful than Pillars of Eternity 2. The irony of it all. Wasteland 3. In Exile's Wasteland 3 sold over 1 million copies, and more than 1 million people tried the game on Game Pass as well, so 2 million players in total. Again, Steam leads the way with 750k copies sold. In total, 23% of players finished this game on a rookie difficulty, while only 3% managed to finish the game on Supreme Jerk, the hardest difficulty in the game. Wasteland 3 deserves to sell even more copies than it actually sold, because this is one brilliant game, and also extremely underrated. So the actual numbers for the Wasteland completion rate would be 23% on Rookie, 20.9% on Wastelander, 7.7% on Ranger difficulty, and Supreme Jerk difficulty ramps up with 2.1%. Dragon Age Origins from BioWare. Old BioWare, the last great game from old BioWare. 25% of players finished Dragon Age Origins. That's one amazing number for any video game, not just for cRPGs. Origins sold over 3.2 million copies in total. Sales are 50-50, 1.6 million on PC and 1.6 million copies on consoles. Less than 1% of players managed to finish Origins on the hardest difficulty available. Origins is the most finished cRPG of all time, by the way. If you wonder why, don't. Go, buy and play. There is a reason why Dragon Age Origins is the most beloved game from cRPG fans worldwide. Solasta, Crown of the Magister. This indie cRPG is a big surprise. Believe it or not, Solasta sold over 400,000 copies, with over 21% of players finishing the game. That's quite amazing for an indie cRPG. With Solasta 2 coming up around the corner, this game can easily sell above 1 million copies now, so Solasta devs are in for some big money. And they deserve it, cause Solasta 1 was really great for an indie cRPG. PC players' completion rate is a whopping 24% on Solasta 1, while consoles only 13%. Solasta sold over 250k copies on Steam only. Pathfinder Kingmaker, the very first game that Alcat ever released. Over 2 million copies sold, with 9.5% of players that actually finished the game, on all difficulties combined. Less than 1% of players managed to finish this game on Unfair, which makes it one of the hardest games in the history of cRPGs. Most of the copies sold are of course on Steam. Kingmaker is 5 times better game than it was on its release date, and definitely it's worth checking it out. Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, the second game from Alcat, the game that's directly responsible for around 1 million copies sold on a previous title for the Kingmaker, because that's how good Wrath of the Righteous actually was. Wrath of the Righteous sold 2.5 million copies, with slightly better completion rate of 13.5%, but only 0.7% of players managed to finish Wrath on Unfair difficulty, one of the hardest games ever created as far as cRPGs go. To me personally, Wrath of the Righteous is the best cRPG in the history of universe. There are many reasons why I say so, and I won't speak about it in this video, but you can check out tons of my videos about Wrath of the Righteous, cause I got around 1000 videos on the channel about this game. Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, the third game from Owlcat. The newest cRPG from Owlcat was quite a success, selling over 1.5 million copies in short time, with 17% of players managing to finish the game. Of course, over 1 million copies are on PCs with Steam. This game, if it goes well by the numbers from Wrath and Kingmaker, should go above 3 million copies in the next 5 years. Only around 0.5% of player base managed to beat Rogue Trader on unfair difficulty, which is absolutely hilarious considering that this game is drastically easier than Pathfinder games from Owlcat, so unfair is really not that hard and more people should be playing on the difficulty because it feels like normal on Pathfinder games. Anyways, this is the only cRPG in the history of mankind that happened in the 40k universe, so I guess we can be grateful that it actually exists. Divinity Original Sin, or so-called DAS 1. The very first cRPG that Larian released, the game that actually saved the genre over 10 years ago. 11.6% of players managed to finish this game, with 2.5 million copies sold. This was also the game of the year a long time ago. Around 5% worldwide managed to finish Divinity Original Sin 1 on the hardest difficulty available, the so-called Tactician mod. Divinity Original Sin 1 is a pure cRPG that focuses primarily on exploration, puzzle solving, and tons of combat. Very little canvas compared to other Larian games, like Baldur's Gate 3. In this case, Divinity Original Sin 1 is the actual video game, not a social dating simulator. Divinity Original Sin 2, the so-called DAS 2, 9.7% of players finished the game only, while the game sold astounding 8 million copies. 2.8% managed to finish this game on Tactician mod, while 0.9% finished the game on Forerunner mod. Divinity Original Sin 2 is basically Baldur's Gate 3 with less social dating simulator options, or should I say Divinity Original Sin 2 is more a pure video game, but you can feel how it all started and how Larian slowly prepared to ruin Baldur's Gate franchise with Divinity Original Sin 2. Anyways, I truly believe that Divinity Original Sin 2 is still a pure masterpiece. Tyranny is one of the most underrated cRPGs ever created. It only sold 350k copies, while the completion rate was astounding 20%, which means that a lot of people actually liked the game that they started. Unfortunately, Tyranny didn't have any resources to continue with the second part and to create a perfect universe. Why is Tyranny so freaking good? This is the only cRPG where you get to play as a pure evil protagonist. No other cRPG offers that. You're fighting the good guys. Very unique idea. Unfortunately, the game flopped. Which doesn't mean that you should not try Tyranny, cause Tyranny is a one brilliant game. Neverwinter Nights, or should I say Neverwinter Nights 1. This is how Dragon Age Origins came to be from Neverwinter Nights. It uses the same engine, the same user interface, everything is basically an upgraded version of Neverwinter Nights, and that's why Dragon Age Origins was so successful. Neverwinter Nights 1 sold over 650k copies with 10% completion rate. Less than 1% of people managed to finish this game on the hardest difficulty available. What is also very important to say about Neverwinter Nights 1 is that now you have an updated version of it with enhanced graphics and tons of mods that you can use to enhance difficulty even further. Neverwinter Nights is definitely worth playing if you haven't played it so far. Neverwinter Nights 2. Neverwinter Nights 2 was probably the buggiest cRPG ever and the most unbalanced cRPG ever, where the hardest difficulty felt like the easiest difficulty in the most stupid game ever released. I don't know how to compare this, but that's the reality. And even today, Neverwinter Nights 2 is one very crappy game. But Neverwinter Nights 2 offered the DLC, Mask of the Betrayer. And Mask of the Betrayer is probably one of the best DLCs ever created in a cRPG history. Believe it or not, that's a separate story, it has nothing to do with the main campaign, and if I'm advising someone to try Neverwinter Nights 2, I definitely recommend for everyone to play Mask of the Betrayer, because that's how brilliant it is. Neverwinter Nights 2 sold over 1 million copies, with close to 20% of players finishing the game. Only less than 1% finished the game on the hardest difficulty available. Disco Elysium. I know there's gonna be comments how, hey, where's Disco Elysium? Disco Elysium is not a full cRPG. Disco Elysium is actually an isometric adventure, but hey, I placed it here just for the comments so I can skip answering why I haven't placed Disco Elysium in the cRPGs. If you see the isometric perspective, it doesn't mean that the game is a cRPG. There's plenty of isometric games that are roguelites, roguelikes, action RPGs, Diablo-likes, and then there's cRPGs and adventures. Disco is an adventure, but hey, I've placed it here, so Disco Elysium is one of the best games ever created, in my personal opinion. It sold over 4 million copies and more than 25% of people managed to finish the game. I mean, it's not hard to finish Disco. No matter what you do, you're gonna finish the game. There is no combat, there is only talking and puzzle solving. But the game is just pure brilliance. It's better than most of the books that you can buy and read. Disco is a pure masterpiece for an adventure. King Arthur, Knight's Tale. Over 600,000 copies sold with 18% completion rate on all difficulties. Less than 3% of player base managed to finish this game on the hardest difficulty available. This is one extremely underrated game. Now, what is very important to say about King Arthur, Knight's Tale? AI is one of the best AIs in a turn-based game history. Not only for cRPG, turn-based cRPGs, in the entire history of AIs, this game offers the best freaking AI that exists. That's how great it is. Combat is really satisfying, especially if you wanna play on the hardest difficulty available. Fallout 1. Fallout 1 is a pioneer of cRPGs and one of the very first cRPGs, isometric cRPGs ever created. This is a legendary game and one of the most popular franchises on the planet Earth. Fallout 1 sold 600,000 copies and 15% of player base managed to finish the game. Fallout 1 is extremely outdated game and it works like crap, but that's how life is. If some game needs a rework, it would be Fallout 1 and Fallout 2. Fallout 2 is actually a DLC for Fallout 1. Because there are no differences between those two games. Fallout 2 sold slightly less than Fallout 1, only 400,000 copies, and completion rate was 9%. Both games require a rework, because they're completely outdated. Expeditions Rome. Expeditions Rome is not a full cRPG, because it's a mix of a real-time strategy and a cRPG, but the gameplay is a pure turn-based isometric cRPG, and that's why it's on the list. Expeditions Rome is a brilliant game. It sold nearly 1 million copies with 25% completion rate. Less than 2% of players managed to finish this game on its hardest difficulty. For the end, we go to the old school giants, Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, Icewind Dale 1 and 2, and Planescape Torment. I left them for the end because all 5 games require a full rework. Even though they have their own enhanced editions, they still require a full rework. They're very old and outdated. Baldur's Gate 1 sold 5.2 million copies in total, believe it or not, with 25% of players managing to finish the game. Baldur's Gate 2 sold 4.3 million copies with 10% of players managing to finish the game. Enhanced editions helped both games a lot, and they boost their sales for an additional 2 million copies. Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 are actually a huge success for a cRPG genre. Baldur's Gate 2 is how you measure other cRPGs, because this is the golden standard. Icewind Dale 1 sold 1.5 million copies with 25% finish rate. Icewind Dale 2 sold 650k copies with less than 20% finishing the game. And for the end, we got Planescape Torment. Planescape Torment sold over 1.5 million copies with only 1.4% completion rate. Why? Because that game is more an adventure, dialogue adventure, than it's actually an RPG, or should I say a cRPG. So the best story in cRPG history managed to see only few thousand people. Shame. An underrated shame. Of course, there are plenty more cRPGs that are not included on this list, including Expedition Vikings, Legacy of the Crusader, Under Rail, plenty of indie cRPGs like Black Gazier, and many more, including Encased, Atom, etc. They're not on a list because I cover the most notable stuff, yeah. The bottom line is that Baldur's Gate 3 is a most successful cRPG ever created. Baldur's Gate 2 is a golden standard of how we measure cRPGs. Wrath of the Righteous is the best cRPG ever created, while Dragon Age Origins is the most beloved cRPG ever created, with Pillars of Eternity 1 being the most underrated cRPG in the universe. That's the reality and the state of cRPG games till 2025. What we got on a plate for the upcoming games are new titles from both Larian and Alket, including the DLC for the Rogue Trader as well as Solasta 2. We can't expect a lot, cause a good cRPG comes once on every 3 to 4 years. That would be the average, yeah. Nonetheless, once cRPG comes out, there is an incredible replay value for every single one of those that I gave on the list. And cRPGs are the games that gonna last forever. Reason is very simple. They're isometric perspective, and they always gonna have a faithful player base, no matter what year it is. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe, and I'll be seeing you on the next one. Thanks for watching.